Midnight Maker. Shh. Oh, sorry, babe. Mancraft 101, making the R2-D2 onesie. Okay, folks, today we're going to be making a custom onesie from the Star Wars Lego R2-D2. It's a cute simplified version of the real thing. The first step is to import the image I downloaded off the internet into the Silhouette Cameo software. I had to guess at the appropriate size to fit the onesie. Next, use the Trace tool to highlight all of the areas to be cut out. Notice it treats all of the colors the same. It'll be up to separate the color layers later. Now move the original out of the way to see the cut lines. I saved this off as R2-D2 all. Now copy and paste that file into a new file. For multiple color prints, I usually go with the darkest colors first, then move to the lighter layers unless there's another reason. For this print, I can locate the black areas first on the onesie, then the gray areas will register within the black automatically so I don't have to mess with registration marks. Next, delete all of the non-black shapes and save the file off as R2-D2 black. Now I load the wax paper into the Silhouette and send the black cut file to the cutter. I always slow down the cutting speed in case there are tight inside corners that might tear out at a faster speed. I'm not in a hurry. I'd rather get it right the first time than to have to redo it. I've cut out hundreds of t-shirts with an X-Acto knife, so I thought getting a cutting machine made a lot of sense. I can crank out a single color shirt in 15 minutes now instead of hours. Carefully peel the wax paper off the cutting mat. This one is still pretty new, so it's really sticky. I peel at 45 degrees and that seems to help keep the cut lines from tearing at the corners. Now you can start to peel away some of the interior detail parts. It's sometimes confusing as to what part of the design you're keeping and which parts you'll be discarding. You're making a negative, so keep the parts that will remain white. Parts that are black are going to go bye-bye. Now here's the tricky part. I had to eyeball the final design and try to figure out where to locate the black layer on the onesie so that the full print is centered. Sometimes the only way to tell is to jump right in and go for it. With the wax shiny side down, I tack the wax paper into place with the iron. Then I make sure it lays flat and iron it completely into place. Make sure all of the edges are firmly stuck or it will ruin the print. With the foam brush, I'll grab a glob of ink out of the jar and spread it onto a blank area of the wax paper. Then I'll load the brush so there's not more glob, but the ink is saturated into the foam. Then I'll lightly dab the areas. If I'm doing a distressed or faded look, I'll go for a lighter, blotchier look. For solid colors, I'll use more, but make sure that you don't soak through the back of the onesie or put a layer of cardboard inside to block the bleed through. Once you've gotten the black saturated enough, especially around the edges, blow dry the ink to keep it from smearing. Then pull the wax paper off, being careful to not get any extra ink on the onesie. Now peel off the interior pieces. I'm using a seam ripper, but you can use anything sharp. You should now see the black layer as it will look on the finished project. If this was a one-color design like I usually make, then you're done. Pretty cool, huh? Now iron the black to set the ink. It might give off some steam and start to feel like plastic. Okay, now to cut the next layer, the gray. Keep in mind that it's extremely important to keep all of the color-separated files at the exact same scale. It's easy to accidentally resize one so that it doesn't fit with the other layers. Cut the gray layer exactly the same way. Starting with the large outside stencil, locate the grill areas inside the black outline. This is conveniently your registration for these two layers. Now apply all of the interior pieces. I always tack them into place first. If needed, you can peel them up and relocate them. Okay, we're back making the R2-D2 onesie project. We left off ironing the gray layer stencil in place. I don't have any gray ink in a jar, so I have to mix my own. When mixing inks like this, it's easier to turn white ink gray by adding a little black to it, rather than to turn black gray by adding a bunch of white. Once I get the right color, I'll start painting it on the same way. Make sure to get all the edges and corners really well. Notice that I mixed a bunch more ink than I needed. That's because if I ran out in the middle of painting the gray layer, it'd be almost impossible to mix another batch of gray that exactly matches. At $8 per jar of ink, I don't mind wasting a bit to ensure the success of the project. Blow dry and peel. You can really see the design coming to life now. There are lots of cool stencils out there that are only 2 colors, and each layer really makes the design pop. Now I iron the onesie once again to really set the colors. You'll feel the ink turn kind of plastic as it cooks, and it'll give off a flash of steam. This is to make sure that the first 2 coats are color fast for the 3rd layer. Be careful that as you iron you don't stretch the onesie out of shape, or the next stencil won't fit correctly. I actually had to pull up the fabric and relax it to get it back to the right size after ironing. Now cut out the blue layer and tack it in place. Notice now the gray layer creates the registration for the blue layer. Note that I had to use some additional masking tape to help create the sharp lines of the blue layer as a cheat. Now it's time to paint on the blue layer. I only had navy paint since I do a lot of nautical themed shirts, so we'll see how that looks. Turns out the navy was way too dark and almost looked like a black layer, so I had to cut out the second blue layer stencil. Then I had to carefully tack the stencil in place, lining it up as perfectly as possible with the navy ink edges. The good news is that if you don't do this perfectly, any navy showing will look like a shadow line of the lighter blue in the final design, as if the blue area was recessed. Now I had to mix up a batch of lighter blue ink. Since I only wanted to lighten the navy blue, I added white to the navy to get what I hope is just the right tint. I painted on the new lighter blue, which turned out to be just right. So here's my little buddy sporting his cool new onesie. Since onesies stretch so much, it really distresses the design nicely and evens out any splotchiness in the ink. I'm not 100% happy with the blue I mixed, but it's much better than the navy was. This was the very first 3-color screen print I've ever attempted, and I think it turned out really well. This certainly opens up a whole new world of custom screen printing, but I usually prefer to stick with the 1-color designs. Making this onesie was one of the very first ideas I had when he was born, and helped me rationalize the purchase of the Silhouette Cameo cutter. Well, I hope you enjoyed following along as I made my little buddy an R2-D2 onesie. You can get the graphic by clicking the link below. Keep in mind that you do not need a Silhouette Cameo to make this project, but it certainly helps. If you're cutting this out by hand, use a steel ruler to keep all the lines nice and straight. Please like, subscribe, etc. so I can keep uploading videos of all the cool projects I do after my little buddy goes to bed. Also, make sure to check out midnight-maker.com for a bunch of other epic projects that we've already made.